Hi everyone, it's Tom Quee here of Silva Screen Records back again, and today I am absolutely delighted to say that I am welcoming one of the foremost composers and conductors in the UK, Debbie Wiseman. I mean, throughout her illustrious career spanning over 4 decades, Debbie has bestowed upon us lucky listeners a treasure trove of iconic themes and unforgettable scores across an extensive range of genres, from horror and romance to animation, comedy, and beyond. She has written for monarchs both past and those currently reigning, alongside some cherished TV themes also. Debbie, great to speak to you.
Oh, great to be here. Thank you, Tom.
Of course, and we're here to speak about Signature, which is your latest release for Silva Screen. Now, can you just explain what that is briefly? It's kind of like your own personal Desert Island Discs in a way, isn't it?
Well, it was coming up to a sort of significant birthday, and I was chatting with the CBSO, and I have had works commissioned by that orchestra before, and they said, "Oh, it would be lovely to collaborate." And I was thinking about, everybody was saying, "Oh my goodness, it's a significant birthday, it's a significant birthday." And to me, it didn't really mean very much. It's just another birthday. But everybody else was saying, "Oh, let's do something." And Classic FM, I'm their composer in residence at the moment, so they were sort of thinking along the same lines. And then I thought, well, what if we do a sort of live album, an album where I pick a selection of scores that have been really important to me over the past however many years, sort of not exactly Desert Island Disc, because some scores I would have loved to have included, but I just couldn't because the forces were different, and they all had to be a sort of similar lineup to make it work and to make it financially viable. So some scores, like, for example, the French film Arsène Lupin, which I did, and things like Lesbian Vampire Killers, which I did, and scores like that, which were huge in terms of scale, I just simply couldn't include. And Edie had a guitar feature throughout, so I couldn't include that because there was no guitar, and it would have been too expensive, to have all these different featured instruments. So I went for just straight orchestral, about a 45-piece orchestra. So everything had to fit into that lineup. So that was my starting point. And then I had to choose around about, 10, 11, 12 scores that would fit into that lineup, but it would also be varied and interesting enough and showcase all the different sort of things that I've been up to over the past few years. And that's where Signature came from. So they're sort of signature scores, but chosen with that in mind, with the CBSO performing it. And then the real highlight of it was that I was able to go and record it with the CBSO live at the CBSO Centre. So we had it's done almost as a concert. So I hope that when people hear the album, and it has been mentioned to me, because there's applause on it and stuff like that, and it is live, that it feels different to a studio album. It has a bit more energy and an element of danger, which you have when you're live. Thankfully, nothing went horribly wrong, but things can, So it had that adrenaline rush to it, which was very special. And of course, they're a fantastic orchestra, and they play beautifully. And some of the scores, they gave their own particular slant to them. I mean, one of the pieces, Elizabeth Remembered, which I wrote for the late Queen's funeral, for the 12 Days of National Mourning. It was commissioned by the BBC and originally played by the BBC Concert Orchestra, but it was performed 5 years before the Queen actually passed away, because it was done in advance, and it had to be done in advance, because, she'd reached 90 and the BBC were preparing for the sad day when it would occur. And so, funnily enough, hearing the CBSO play it after the event, it had a whole different meaning and a whole different performance level. And that was one which really took on a completely different colour to how it sounded when the BBC Concert Orchestra performed it. Both equally beautiful, but there was a different slant on it with the CBSO.
I want to focus on some of those individual tracks on Signature, but just before we do, I just wanted to speak a little more generally about the collaborative nature of writing music for the screen. I mean, obviously, inherently, it's collaborative. You need something to be inspired by visually, to infuse with subtext, and also, the piece needs you to help it come alive. But I'm thinking more in terms of the collaboration between yourself and the director. And I understand it's the director that is the main point of contact, right, in terms of styling the music for the film.
Yeah, it is usually the director. I mean, the director has a creative vision. So you work, and the collaboration is absolutely the name of the game. You know, you work with the editor, producers, and director. And all these people, sometimes even executive producers, and all these people come together and they have a vision for the score usually. It's not usually a blank page. It's usually something that they've heard before that you might have done that they think is possibly right for their particular film. Or it's a temp track that they put together, which is a temporary score that they've got from other sources that gives them some kind of shorthand to let the composer know what they're after. Or simply, with Wolf Hall, when I started with Peter Kosminski, I've worked with him so many times before. It's a slightly different process because he likes to have the music in advance of like even filming. So I worked on Cromwell's theme and Anne's theme before he'd shot the frame of the film, and that's very unusual. But then when we come to the actual scoring process, I've already got quite a lot of material. I had about 25 minutes of music already written. And then it was a case of really looking at it and spotting it, which is where you decide where the music starts and finishes and then creating the score. And I've just done the same process now because he's just about to start shooting Wolf Hall 2, which is the final part of the trilogy, The Mirror and the Light. They're starting shooting that in a few weeks' time. And I had exactly the same process with Peter on that, in that I've written probably around 20, 25, 30 minutes of music already. He starts shooting in a few weeks' time. And then when he finishes shooting next year, we'll come back and he'll sit at the piano with me here and we'll work through the themes and see which ones work, which ones don't work, which ones he wants to develop, and start to piece it all together.
And do you prefer when directors have some kind of musical knowledge? Or I guess, like, you're not offering, advice in terms of cinematography, are you? So is that something you value, or?
It is a collaboration. I do value, the thing about a director is it doesn't matter whether they have musical knowledge or not. It's completely irrelevant. Some do, some don't. Some know what they love and some have no idea what they're going to get until they get it, or whether they're going to like it until they get it. It doesn't make any difference at all. The key thing for me, and the key thing to a good relationship with a director, is there has to be some level of trust in the composer. And they have to trust you that you're going to do the best you possibly can for the job, and also that you understand the mechanics of creating a score. It's not just about writing the notes at the piano, it's about orchestration, and I always do my own orchestrations. It's about getting into the studio with the right musicians, conducting it, hearing it back, listening to how it works with dialogue and sound effects. There's a whole process that you need to have respect for, and that's what's very important. If that isn't there and it's just, can we just have this tomorrow, by Friday, of course it's not going to work. But most directors, and good directors, and I'm fortunate that I have worked with a lot of extremely talented directors, they know exactly what the process is, and they want you to come to it with your vision and deliver the score that hopefully elevates the film to a whole other level. We know how important music is in film.
Many bad films can have good soundtracks. And I'm not trying to slander any films here, but I'm thinking of, say, The Scarlet Letter, for example, the Demi Moore remake with Gary Oldman. It's kind of widely disregarded. It rewrote the ending. It's a little odd. But John Barry's score is completely sublime, and I know you're a John Barry fan. Can a film be truly great in your eyes if the soundtrack is bad or ill-fitting?
Everything has to come together. I think you can have a good film with a bad soundtrack, actually. And I think you can have a great soundtrack with a bad film. Ideally, everything comes together and the whole vision is perfect and everything seamlessly comes together. And that's when it's at its best. That's when the cinematic experience is at its best. And it doesn't always happen, but it's a sort of exciting journey, whatever it is. And sometimes I watch the production and I look at it and I think, wow, this is absolutely stunning. And it almost overwhelms me because I think, how am I going to write something to live up to this? And other times I look at a production and I think, gosh, this needs help. This needs musical help. You know, it will really benefit from a great score and everything in between. So there are all sorts of levels of excellence. And I'm often wrong with what I like and what I don't like. And things that I thought have been fantastic have gone away and sunk without a trace. And other things that I thought have been maybe, you know, not so great have been huge successes. So, you know, I'm not the best judge of it, but I know whatever I work on, I will make sure that the music, because that's, you know, that's my part to play, that the music is the best it can possibly be to serve that particular production. And that's the composer's job. They have to serve whatever it is that's put in front of them, whether it's great, brilliant, or, you know, not so great.
And how much music can you write in a given day? I mean, I've read about some of the timelines you've been up against for like Flood and Wild, and you know, you seem to really thrive under those pressure conditions. But like, how many minutes per day if you're working at speed?
Oh my goodness! I mean, I actually don't count the minutes. It's more the it could be as much as something like 10 minutes a day. It could be. It's unlikely to be quite as much as that. But I know when I've been under real pressure, it's gone up to that level roughly. But when you think about it, you know, the tunes themselves I can write very quickly. So coming up with a theme, I mean, if you gave me, you know, any kind of scenario now, I'd turn around at the piano and I'd come up with some sort of theme. But that's not the end of it. Then you have to shape it and orchestrate it and make it work for the film. And there's a lot of other things to take into consideration. It's not just coming up with the tune. And that's what takes the time. So if I was just sitting at the piano and I had to write 10 minutes of piano music in a day, I could probably do that if I knew what I was doing and I had the right ideas and I knew what it was for and the purpose of the music. But then to orchestrate it and get it ready for an orchestra to play or an ensemble or whatever it is, that's what takes the real time.
And, you know, there's so much focus on melody in your work, and, you know, you have so many unforgettable melodies that I'm really, you know, excited to get into momentarily. And you've spoken about, you know, the power of 3 to 5 notes and drawing the audience in, and, you know, the value of not over cluttering. So are you finding melodies easier to generate as you go on, more difficult, no change? Like, what is that relationship like with a hook, with generating like this?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think I've always thought melodically. So when I write for anything, I try and come up with a hook, an idea. And it doesn't have to be a long lyrical melody, but it's a hook. It's something that draws you in and that feels instantly, seamlessly linked to whatever it is that it should be linked to. So if that's either a film or, you know, when I did the Glorious Garden album with Alan Titchmarsh, which was an album for Classic FM, that was sitting at the piano with his poems about his favorite plants and flowers. And that was enough to sort of set me on a particular path. With Wolf Hall, I had all the inspiration of the film itself, the Tudor period, thinking about Tudor instruments and all that came into play. So that was what it sets you off on a particular path. You know, my composition teacher used to say, write something every day so that you never run out of ideas and you've always got something to inspire, you know, something to fall back on. So I will always be able to come up with an idea. It may not be the best tune in the world, and I may sort of throw it out at the end of the day and start again the following day, but I know I can come up with something. And that's the key to it, because often there is a huge amount of time pressure sometimes, and you do have to come up with a lot of music in a very short space of time. And it is experience, and it is knowing how to draw on those skills that you've learnt over the years, and not getting too worried about it. You know, you can't have composer's block ever. That just doesn't exist.
So getting into your career now and your compositions, you know, one of the things that I love to do, Debbie, like I'm obsessed with kind of more obscure cultural history. So I love to troll people's IMDb profiles and just to see what they work at. And there's so much stuff, you know, a lot of the stuff doesn't even have a thumbnail or whatever. It's like, what is this TV film, you know? And it was a joy really going through yours, you know, starting in 82, A Week in Politics. That was your first thing when after you graduated. Is that right, for Channel 4?
Yeah, it was it was certainly the first sort of series. I'd done a film for the same production company called A Vote for Hitler, which was I think that might have been the first, and A Strike Out of Time. They were both for Brook Lapping Productions, and Brook Lapping Productions were a really successful they were really successful production company specializing in drama documentaries and documentaries. And then A Week in Politics started, and they said, oh, we need a theme, and it's Sunday morning, and we want to get people into the mood of the Sunday political discussion that we're about to have. Well, we don't want to frighten them off, so I wrote this sort of slightly breezy but bright theme. And then eventually it moved into a sort of slightly later slot, and I turned it slightly more jazzy. So it was slightly more laid back. So I had two different versions of that. But yes, it was, on all these first gigs that you get, first commissions, they're incredibly important because they set you on the path to being a composer. Until you've got credits and people can see your name on screen, nobody will ask you to write music for them. So those were incredibly important first steps. And Brook Lapping, I was very lucky that I was working with them on 3 or 4 productions. Death of Yugoslavia was one which won loads of awards, and lots of other stuff for them, the Churchills. They were such a busy production company. And because I was able to work quickly, and they hadn't worked with a composer before, it just gelled, and we were really fortunate that we got, within a year, I'd been working on 2 or 3 of their productions, suddenly had a few credits, and suddenly I thought, oh, maybe I can even start calling myself a composer because I've got credits. It's all about credits.
And just looking through again, it was 12 years until your first film breakthrough with Tom and Viv. And there was something just before this called Sloggers, a TV series about a junior cricket team, apparently, called Sloggers. Yeah. Is that a reasonable description for what were you slogging then? Were you going through these projects, or were you quite established as you got into Tom Viv? Because it seems like you were very busy, to be honest with you. It's quite a sort of hefty credit list. Yeah,
there were definitely gaps at the beginning, definitely. And, my husband and I met at Guildhall School of Music and Drama, and he's a great singer. And we were playing in a band, and we were doing sort of functions and gigs in the evening just to keep, ticking over and earning some money and being able to, actually make music and make sure there was some income coming in, because it was pretty hit and miss. But then eventually, after Tom and Viv, really, we were able to stop all that and go, it's what I call sort of really full time into the composition, and everything else stopped. And I just focused completely on writing and didn't have to do all the gigging and playing in bands and all that sort of stuff, which was lovely, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. So that was the starting point, really. But I think it was a slog. It wasn't easy at all to get enough commissions coming in that you could sort of feel comfortable, that you could stop doing everything else. Well, sometimes when, young composers write to me and they're just graduating from college or whatever, and they say, how do you get started? There really is no rule or right way or wrong way to get started. You just have to try and be as visible as possible, get your music out there, and hope that somebody will like it, hear it, and give you a break. And there's a lot of rejection, and there's a lot of I sent off something like, I don't know, maybe 100 demo reels off to producers and directors and everybody I could think of before I got a reply. And Brook Lapping was one of the ones that replied. And I was fortunate that they did, but a lot of people didn't reply. And so you sort of have to have quite a thick skin. And even when you're established, actually, you're only really as good as your last gig. And it's the same in all areas of the media. If you're an actor, if you're an editor, production designer, whatever, there is no security. Nobody advertises for a composer. Nobody advertises for these jobs, and you have to make your own way. And you have to be kind of pretty. You've got to want to do it more than anything else, and be pretty tenacious. And I did. I wanted to do it more than anything else, and so I kept going. And a lot of times it's quite easy to give up because it is hard and it's tricky to keep the momentum going. But music is, for me, the most rewarding profession to be in. I love working with musicians. I love writing music. I love being around musicians. So the whole thing for me is just the best. And I was prepared to sort of keep, as you say, slogging away until it became a little easier.
Well, speaking of, someone who seems secured in their genius and then had everything pulled up from underneath them, we have Oscar Wilde and your work on Wilde, which features in Signature as well, which I was very pleased to see. Now, this is a fantastic score, and it seems to me like you really imbued it with the qualities of the man himself. It seemed to be, the film, but also it had his, his obsession with beauty, his playfulness, and then in later elements, the anguish that he felt. Like it was really well crafted, I felt.
It was an amazing film to have the opportunity to score. This was one where it was very late in the day. There'd been all sorts of production problems, and I was called in 3.5 weeks before we were booked in at Abbey Road to record with the orchestra. So it was a huge task, and talk about adrenaline rush. I mean, this was probably, I would say, the fastest I ever had to write a score. Flood came pretty close, but this was faster. And I think the fact that it was fast and the fact that I had to deliver really quickly allowed it just in some ways to flow there was no second chance to do it. I wrote exactly what I saw on the screen. As you say, Wilde was very a tortured soul, so it's quite chromatic. The theme doesn't feel too settled in any one place. The theme for Constance, I remember the director, Brian Gilbert, saying to me, it must be just a beautiful theme because she was so loyal to him and she stood by him through everything. And I want that beauty in her theme. And so it's sort of quite hymn-like and, sorry, that was my phone. It's quite hymn-like and reflective. But a lot of the music was written incredibly fast, incredibly, just without any fear, I suppose, because if you've only got that time to write and you've got to deliver, you just do it. And I completely collapsed at the end of it after the 3.5 weeks and probably was completely, exhausted. But there is something about working fast. And I think it taught me as well that it is possible to do it. And of course, the film itself with Stephen Fry's just brilliant performance of Oscar Wilde and Jude Law was fantastic as Bosie. It had such a fantastic response, and it opened the door to all sorts of other amazing productions. So it was a very powerful 3.5 weeks.
And was this the beginning of your working relationship with Stephen Fry? Because obviously you've gone on to do a lot together.
Yeah, it was. It absolutely was, because we met on Wilde at the premiere. It was all very lovely. And then we worked on the setting of Oscar Wilde's fairy stories, The Selfish Giant and The Nightingale and the Rose, which was an album for Warner Classics. And Stephen narrated, and Vanessa Redgrave also narrated one of the stories. And that was, she was also brilliant in the film. So that was a kind of, a project following on. And then we did another project, Different Voices, which was like a new young person's guide to the orchestra. She narrated. And then most recently, we've worked together on Mythos, the Mythos suite, which was Stephen's retelling of the Greek myths. And I set some of them to music. He narrated it, and we recorded that at Abbey Road as well. And that was just phenomenal because they are such brilliant stories. They're so music friendly. And Stephen is so wonderful. He came into the studio and we'd recorded all the music, but then his narration had to go on top. He was quite worried about recording with music because it's not something he's done before. And you have to be like a singer. You have to sort of follow the score and follow the movement of the music, and the narration had to slot in the right bars. And he was quite worried. He sat down behind the microphone. Absolute truth. I think he made maybe one error in the whole recording, one word error. He is so fluent and so ridiculously brilliant at it. And we were all just, completely open mouthed, thinking, my goodness, he hadn't done it before, recording with an orchestra backing him. And it was so slick and so brilliant. So he had the best time. And it was a fantastic project to work on with him.
And following this in 99, and this is again on Signature, is the theme to Tom's Midnight Garden, which I love this theme. I feel like this shows a different side to you. It's very playful, full of joy, has this certain mystery, this certain crepuscular sort of magic to it.
It was such a lovely. I mean, I loved the book. I don't know. Have you read the book?
I have, yes, of course, yeah.
As a child, I mean, it was such a brilliant, one of my favorite books as a child.
Mm.
And so when I got the call about it, saying, "Oh, the director would like to meet you to talk about Tom's Midnight Garden," I was just so excited to talk about it. And then to actually be able to write the score. And of course, it's slightly different on screen to how I'd imagined it in the book. So I had to slightly reset my imagination. But it was a very playful, very uplifting score. I absolutely loved it. There was so much music in it and so much opportunity for music. When Tom was sort of exploring the garden, it was almost like writing music for a ballet because he was just running around the garden exploring. And then at the end, one of the real thrills of it, at the end, I'd written the whole score and I'd written the main theme. And everybody's saying, "Oh, I wonder if we should have a song at the end. It would be really nice to wrap it up with a song. And maybe the main theme could be somehow woven into a song and you can get lyrics and everything." And then one of the team suggested Don Black, the brilliant lyricist, and he's written James Bond themes and he's worked with John Barry a lot. And they brought Don in and he wrote this beautiful lyric called After Always. And we got Barbara Dixon to sing it. And that ended the movie. And it's the main theme, but with his words, her vocal. And for me at that time, it was just such a thrill to be able to do that. And then I've continued to have a lovely working relationship and friendship with Don since then. And we've worked on loads of things together since then. And actually, at the moment, we're writing a new musical together called Feather Boy for next year. And it's based on a book by Nikki Singer, beautiful story about the relationship between young people and old people. And he's written some of what I think are maybe his best lyrics. They're absolutely wonderful. So very excited about that for next year.
Amazing. Yeah, that is very intriguing. And yeah. I want to talk about Wolf Hall next, because this is my personal favorite score of yours. I think it's absolutely sublime. Actually became a fan of you, Debbie, probably around a little bit of a weirder way, like Mojo Magazine. I'm a big fan of Mojo Magazine, and they often have their score section. And they were just raving about this Wolf Hall score, and they were talking about the instrumentation and the melody. And they actually compared you to Nick Cave and Warren Ellis. I don't know if have you ever listened to any of their scores?
No, but I haven't even seen this thing in Mojo, so...
I'll try and find it. But yeah, I'll take it out. Yeah,
I haven't even seen it.
It was just a little thing there.
Something I need to put on the wall.
Yeah. I was just like, okay, I was aware of Wolf Hall and the TV show, etc. But listening to this, I was just so entranced. And like one of the things that I've always wanted to ask you, I never knew I was going to speak to you until a few weeks ago, but the use of percussion throughout this score, I'm thinking particularly in Prophecies and Dreams, and also Master of Phantoms. There's such a kind of menacing space. Like, what was the choice to use that, and how did you use that? Because I've listened to a lot of your music over the last week or so, and it's something new. I think there's a lot of stuff in Wolf Hall that I've not heard you do before that is so great.
Yeah, and again, it's through Peter Kosminski, the director. It's through his eyes, a lot of that score. We sat down right at the beginning and he said, I don't want it to be pastiche Tudor music. I don't want green sleeves. And I want it to feel modern and contemporary, as if these characters are living now. And what they're experiencing is in the present, even though it's Tudor times, they are experiencing in the present. So it was that idea of making it feel very present and contemporary. And that's where the percussion came in, and using percussion that was ambiguous where it came from. So it wasn't modern tom-toms or anything like that, or a big, snare drum or anything like that. But it was big drums and lots of sort of slightly ethnic percussion in there. But we did use some Tudor instruments as well, like the lute, and there's harpsichord, and there's theorbo, which is like a giant lute, and a recorder, and there was some mandolin, and percussion. And the rest of it was just string quintet, cor anglais, oboe, and very, very, a little bit of harp. It was very sparse score. And the key to it was that Peter said to me, I don't want it to be full orchestral and lush, because we're showing this in an authentic way, and Peter is all about authenticity. And sorry, it just popped up on my screen. It's all about authenticity and making it feel real and completely believable. And that's what he wanted for the score. He wanted it to feel true to the way he shoots it, which is raw, and it's not, it's a kind of, I call it unperfumed, it's just raw and authentic. And the performances by Mark Rylance and Damian Lewis and Claire Foy was so brilliantly understated and powerful that it was also my job not to get in the way of that and to just allow it to speak while also supporting where it needed it. And that was the key to it. And I think it'll be exactly the same with the final part of the trilogy, which, we'll be working on early next year, because he's going to shoot it in exactly the same way. There'll be elements of the first series, but we've moved it on a little bit as well, and there'll be new themes as well. But the color and that palette of sound will definitely remain.
Oh, I can't wait. I mean, the performance of Wolf Hall on Signature as well is immaculate. I guess just the momentum of the tune, and we spoke about melody before as well. And I'm loath to sing a melody line to Debbie Wiseman, but the sort of the needling main melody of it is just terrific. It really feels like Tudor intrigue and kind of courtier naughtiness, and just it's all kind of wrapped up in there.
Yeah, you do. I mean, on the Signature album, of course, it is a full orchestral version of it with a bigger string section, and it was recorded in a more lush orchestral way. But that was because it was a celebratory album, and that's what we were doing. And actually, Peter loved that performance of it. And I think the cor anglais player was completely brilliant. Emma was fantastic on that. He played it beautifully. So that there are different ways of doing it. But for the actual film itself, for the television series itself, to keep it raw and to keep it just with a small lineup of string quintet, we use a Locrian Ensemble of London, fantastic players. Perry Montague Mason on violin and Philip Jukes on viola and Justin Pearson on cello. And we had all these amazing musicians, and they just turned up as soloists almost and played as soloists, but then came together to create the Wolf Hall, that raw sound, which is powerful. And I think it was absolutely the right call of Peter to sort of point me in that direction. It would have been easy to have made it feel like a normal period drama score, quite full, quite lush, giving it all the energy and the gorgeousness of those period drama scores. And I have written a few of that in that style. And it's lovely to do. And I adore writing that sort of music. But for this, it needed something a little bit rougher, a little bit more raw, and a bit rough around the edges, not so beautifully lush and glamorous.
So also on Signature is a song, a new song, as it were, a Lustre To This Day, which had not been on any of your scores prior. And I'm unfamiliar with this kind of working, Debbie, where you had written this piece for someone else. Steven, what was his name? Sorry,
Steven Isserlis.
Isserlis, sorry.
Steven
Yeah.
Isserlis, the cellist. Yeah.
Is this common? Is this common that, composers will often write something for someone else's playing? Like, I just found that quite intriguing.
Yeah, I love knowing who's going to play the piece that I'm writing, especially if it's a solo. It's really important because you can imagine their sound and you can create something bespoke for that particular player. Now, Steven Isserlis is one of the great cellists in the country. Phenomenal cellist. And I was asked by Classic FM to write something sort of bringing the new year and something that felt a little bit more optimistic. It was post-pandemic and it was something that would feel a little bit more optimistic, full of hope. And I wrote this little melody and I thought, it would be fantastic if we could get a cellist to play this. And then between us, we thought about Stephen. I asked him, and amazingly, he said yes, that he would do it. And I was so thrilled. And he recorded it absolutely beautifully, just with him on the cello and Mishka Rushdie Momen on piano. And the two of them recorded it, just piano and cello at Abbey Road, in the big room at Abbey Road. Is amazing. And it sounded glorious. And then, because it had been so simple, it had been such a simple orchestration, I thought I must try and orchestrate this. And so I gave it a bigger orchestration. And what you hear on Signature is the same cello solo, but not just with piano accompaniment, but with full orchestral accompaniment. And it allowed it to move forward into an orchestral world. And I was so thrilled that I had the opportunity to do that for the album. And the CBSO played it brilliantly, and the cellist was amazing. So it has all sorts of different, I suppose, opportunities to develop that particular theme. And maybe at some stage I'll do it for something else or write it for another instrument. But for me, it's fantastic if I know who's going to be playing, who's going to be singing, who's going to be doing the solos, because you imagine them in your head and everybody has their own particular sound. And it's wonderful to know exactly what that sound is.
And opening the record are two pieces from your Glorious Garden collaboration with Alan Titchmarsh that you touched on before, Water Lily and Myrtle. These are great openers, aren't they, really? I mean, they have such an elegance and a dance, and they really feel like they're kind of unfurling, in a kind of botanical way.
Well, again, I had Alan's poems to inspire me. We had a talk about writing for people. I had Jack Liebeck perform the solos on the album, and the CBSO's leader was absolutely brilliant on the record as well. But, again, knowing who you're writing for is fantastic, and be able to imagine I had the poem to inspire Myrtle and Water Lily, and then I knew that Jack was going to be doing the solo for me for the album. All that feeds into being able to come up with something that you feel is right for that particular moment. And in the end, it's only you. It's quite a loaded job sitting at the piano and writing away. You've got to come up with themes and ideas, and then the whole business of orchestration. But for me, the joy of it at the end, and the reason that I want to continue writing lots of music is because hearing it played back to you for the first time by those brilliant musicians. I mean, Steven, Jack Liebeck, all these, CBSO, they're all world-class musicians, and they play back the music to me that I've just literally probably just finished writing. And I get that thrill of hearing it performed for the first time, and then being able to shape it and shape the performance and create something magical in the studio. And it really is, for me, it's the best job in the world. It's such a thrill to hear the music played by these amazing musicians. And they bring it to life in a way that before that they bring it to life, it's just little dots and dashes on the page and little scribbles, and looks a bit like Chinese. And it doesn't mean anything, but they play it and it really does mean something.
And the final pieces that I want to focus on in Signature are ones that I believe you wrote for Viking, is that right? Viking Voyages. Yeah. And Viking, and in particular Onwards, is a sensational piece, like so rousing. Like, I find it so inspirational. I really want to take to the sea when I listen to it. Like, I can't, it just fills me, with such Cambria.
I'm so thrilled to hear you say that. And Viking would be thrilled to hear you say that.
Yeah, I'm sure they would.
That's exactly what the intention was. I mean, Viking Cruises, they've been running for many, many years, hugely successful and very, very beautiful ships, the river and ocean ships. And they wanted some signature music. And so The Traveller was my first piece that I wrote for them, which was inspired by going on their gorgeous ships. This was all in research, obviously, Tom,
Oh, yes, naturally.
Yeah, it wasn't put in enjoyment, just research. And they were absolutely beautiful. And how could you not be inspired by, sailing on beautiful oceans and rivers and the sunsets and the glorious comfort on their ship? So The Traveller was that. But then they were, a few years later, they won loads and loads of prizes for best ocean ship, best river ships, and in the Traveller magazines, Condé Nast Traveller magazines. And they had a meeting, and they said, they had reached this huge level of success. And in the meeting, they asked the chairman, look, we've reached this huge level. Where do we go from here? And he said, I wasn't at the meeting, but I hear from them, but he said, you go onwards. And so their theme of onwards is how it started. And it was that theme of, okay, we're off now. We're running. We're successful. We've got a fantastic business here. Everybody loves going on a Viking cruise. And we're onwards. And so that whole idea of excitement, going on a journey, adventures, discovering things, the feeling of being curious. What are you going to find when you're in these different locations and you're going from destination to destination? It's thrilling. It's exciting. There's all the elements of joy, danger, all those things within the piece. But it's the excitement that was inspiring for that piece. So I'm thrilled to say that I'm thrilled to hear you say that it makes you want to get on.
Absolutely. Well, I've been listening to so much of your work and going through things. I was like, where is Onwards? So I was like, what film's this from? And it was like, yeah, it was nice to discover that it was Viking. So
yeah, if you go on a Viking cruise, you'll hear as you probably enter their cabins, their gloriously luxurious cabins. Oh. Yeah, The Traveller playing or Onwards playing. It's their sort of signature music.
Wow. So the greatest elevator music in the world. Like that is wild. Yeah. So the last thing I want to ask you about is, anyone can score a film, right, or whatever. But you have written also some iconic TV themes. And I was delighted to discover that you wrote the Andrew Marr theme, which has always been a theme that I've loved. And kind of, okay, maybe I'm pulling a string here, but like feels a little Wolf Hall-y to me. It feels like just in the case of you have this very busy, under engine kind of thing, and then you have this searing line going through. But can you just talk to me briefly about the Andrew Marr theme, please? Because I think it's an earworm.
I mean, you're right. Actually, there is like the strings underneath, and it was quite a small lineup. I mean, the actual music is very, very different, but I can see why you're saying that. But the editor came up and said, look, we need a new theme for Andrew Marr's new show, and it's going to be on Sunday mornings, and we want everybody to be woken up with a bright, busy, okay, this is Sunday morning discussion, quite different to a week in politics, actually, but we want it to be arresting and get people really, out of bed on a Sunday morning. Sure. And by the way, they said, Andrew Marr loves jazz. So maybe you could think about that. And I thought, well, I can't make it jazzy because that's not going to be arresting and driven enough. So I'm going to write something that's got a very busy string undercurrent, and then I'll put a soprano saxophone on the top, and that will be my nod to it being like, Andrew Marr loves jazz. So that's what I did, and they thought that was going to work well. So you hear the soprano sax, you got your string undercurrent, it's quite busy, it's arresting, and this soaring sax. And the funniest thing was that a few years later, after I'd written it, we were invited onto the Andrew Marr show to play it out live. It was a special show. Went on the show. And I met Andrew for the first time because I hadn't met him. I've just been working with the editor. And I said to him, your theme tune, and the fact that it's got a saxophone on the top, that's for you. That's because you like jazz. And he just looked completely blankly at me and said, I don't really like jazz.
So it's going to say, he didn't seem like a jazz head to me. I don't know. It doesn't give that vibe. Yeah.
It's a complete bum steer. But he was stuck with it, whether he liked it or not.
Oh, yeah. I think it's pretty unforgettable. It really kind of stands out, even when in the background you can just pinpoint it. I think you wrote something great there.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very important, isn't it, with TV themes? So even if you're making your breakfast or a cup of tea, or you're in the kitchen, whatever you're doing, that when you hear the theme to your favorite program, that's starting, and that draws you in to watch. So that's exactly what the intention was it be something arresting that would draw you in. And it's sometimes hard to come up with those themes because you've got to have the right combination of elements. And also now, particularly now with TV themes, they keep them very short. So you haven't got, when I wrote, I don't know if you remember a series called The Upper Hand with, it was a comedy series with Honor Blackman and Joe McGann. Ran for years and years and years. And the end credits was a minute and a half. And I would write a minute and a half of music for the end credits, and it had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, on a TV series, you're lucky if you get 20 seconds. And that's the difference. And then you've got to truncate and find something that works in 20 seconds. And it's not easy. Even 30 is hard.
Yeah, and often the screen will be pushed to one side, right? And they'll have trailers for the other things. You can't even hear it anyway. So you
can't even hear it anyway. No, and because everybody's worried about channel hopping, that they're going to be turning over, and so you've got to kind of keep people's interest. So just shove the credits over to one side because nobody really cares about that, and let's just move on. And so, I mean, I have no idea, but that's what happens. So you have to sort of be able to come up with that sort of theme that is arresting, that has energy, or that has a particular hook that draws somebody in, but in a very short space of time. And it's the same with adverts as well. They have to get their idea across in 25 seconds, 20 seconds. And it's really hard to do. And it's a skill that you have to learn when you're writing for the media, for television, is how to get your message across very quickly, very succinctly, with as fewer notes as possible, and make it really work for whatever it is that you're trying to deliver.
Well, Debbie, this has been a true delight, and it's been great speaking to you. I guess finally, if people want to find your work, I suppose, debbiewiseman.com, is that the main source they should go to?
It's debbiewiseman.co.uk.
.co.uk.
Yeah, it's pretty up to date. And of course, I'm on Twitter, which is just Wiseman Debbie, and I post stuff on there.
Debbie, thank you so much again.
Okay. Pleasure.